Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
So how are you feeling, Canada? There's a big wave of patriotism right now. What with the U.S. president's constant comments about trade, tariffs, and pot shots against our fine country.
Canada's going to be a very interesting situation because, we just don't need their product. And yet they survive off the fact that we do 95% of what they do. And Canada is just absolutely, I say it, and sometimes people smile and sometimes they say great idea, but Canada, their taxes would come down greatly, their security would go up greatly. Amazing things happen to Canada, and really Canada in this particular, why would we pay $200 billion a year in subsidies to Canada when they're not a state? You do that for a state, but you don't do that for somebody else's country. So I think Canada is going to be a very serious contender to be our 51st state.
Because of comments like that, we're rallying around the flag, and a lot of people are saying that they're looking to buy specifically Canadian-made products. But how far are you willing to go with that, and what are you willing to pay? Welcome to In This Economy. My name is Mike Eppel. We're joined on the line today by retail analyst Bruce Winder to talk about some of the proud-to-be-a-Canadian trends. Bruce Winder, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on the program.
We've heard a lot, Bruce, about increased patriotism. We just had Flag Day on Saturday. Are you seeing this show up yet in some of the retail stats from consumers?
Yeah, it's a little early to see specific stats from Stats Canada because they're, a month or two behind. But anecdotally, I'm hearing quite a bit of chatter from retailers about how Canadians are really buying more Canadian product. I know that the president of Loblaws put out a post, I think it was today on LinkedIn, that mentioned that they're seeing a specific uptake on Canadian made or Canadian grown or Canadian fabricated product. So I think you're starting to see it take flight at retail.
Is this something, though, that Canadian retailers have to make better use of, so to speak? Is the labeling clear enough for consumers to know exactly what it is that they're buying?
Well, I think the labeling is okay, but I think what stores can do is they can market it more, better. I know that, company stores should be putting up signs. I know Loblaws putting up signs and things talking about items being from Canada. So I think retailers need to tap out their horn a little bit. I know we're Canadian. We're not really good at doing that, but we have to sort of toot our horn a bit and say, hey, this is made in Canada. Make it easy for the consumer to buy. One thing I noticed that Loblaw was doing in the retail sector is on their PC Optimum app, you can actually, when you're shopping on there, you can press a button if you have something and it'll show you the Canadian equivalent. And then it'll show you the sort of the value-driven equivalent if you're looking at watching your budget. So retailers are getting pretty serious right now, quickly in the short run, about trying to make it easy for Canadians to buy Canadian product where possible.
And are we going to see more ads? I know Tim Hortons, for example, had an ad during the Super Bowl about football being the second best sport or something of that nature, really kind of driving home the idea that hockey is still number one, but waving that Canadian flag.
Yeah, that was a great ad on the Super Bowl, and that was very timely. They really got that together quickly, and it hit the mark time-wise. And I think you're going to see a little bit more of that. I think because especially as we're really just starting this potential trade war with the U.S., I think if Trump's tariffs go into play, they're going to kick out, I think March 3rd, and then there could be sort of another tariff on aluminum and steel coming out after that. So yeah, this is the time, and I think Canadians are going to dig in, and I think it's wise for marketers, brands to talk about their Canadian roots.
Having said that, it sounds like some of the polling that Leger put out recently about the spending trends or intentions of Canadian consumers. Yes, they're looking for Canadian products, but it seems like that only goes so far. In as much as one of the questions asked was, are you willing to get rid of U.S. streaming services, for example, Netflix and Disney Plus? And a few people were a little bit more reticent about doing that. So maybe it's particular segments of American products that they might be looking at.
Yeah, we have to be realistic about it too. I mean, I don't know many people who would give up their Netflix subscription, right? So I think that, Canadians will do the best where they can, especially if there's a substitute product, an easy substitute to go from American to Canadian. That's probably a no-brainer. The other thing Canadians have to watch too is it's a pretty tough time economically right now. There's a lot of folks living hand to mouth. So in some cases, if the Canadian alternative is more expensive, they might not be able to do that. They may have to stick with whatever's cheapest right now.
Yeah, this hour has 22 minutes. Did a spoof of that about basically a shopper going through the store, putting all sorts of Canadian products in their cart, and then at the end of the day, it's like, oh, this costs $300 plus, and they put most of it back. So yeah, so in that point, then in the same vein, do they also have to offer maybe some lower prices? It's fine to say buy Canadian, but like you say, if it's too expensive, that price still does matter.
Yeah, retailers are going to have to make that decision. They realize the Canadians right now a lot of Canadians are in rough shape finance-wise. So I think a lot of Canadian companies, whether it's Canadian Tire, Loblaw, whoever, they're all going to go out there and try to source locally where they can, but they realize that they have to keep their price in line. They can't push on a big increase. Now, one of the challenges, and this is real, that retailers face is the weakening of the Canadian dollar too, right? So, anything that you bring in from outside of Canada, in most cases, the retailers buy it in US dollars, even if it's from China. And because our loonie has just been hammered, that's an automatic cost increase at the retail shelf. So it's going to be really tough for retailers and consumers to navigate the next little while as it relates to inflation.
And Canadian Tire, in their earnings report, also talked about trying to source some of these things and how difficult that is, and doing so in a timely manner. First of all, you can't just upend the supply chain, within days. And secondly, they noted, look, consumers are still faced with all of these price pressures, as you mentioned, and that's likely going to dampen retail spending regardless of the point of origin.
Yeah, it's a great point. And yeah, Greg Hicks talked about that, the CEO of Canadian Tire, this week on the earnings call. It's tough right now. And you know what? A lot of these industries have left Canada too. Even if you want to buy Canada, there might not be a local Canadian company who can make what you want because of globalization and because of, the NAFTA CUSMA arrangements over the last 30 years where we've sort of harmonized production across 3 countries. So it's really tough right now. Retailers have their homework cut out for them. And the Canadian consumer, according to Greg too, the Canadian consumer, some of that momentum we saw in the fourth quarter may have been jettisoned a little bit based on some of these this tariff discussion of late.
Is there a risk that some American retail operating in Canada may look at the signals coming from the Trump administration and the tariff issues and trade and cross-border and the dollar and all these other things and just say, maybe Canada's not the market we want to be in? We've seen some big name retailers in the past retreat, and that was well before any of these issues cropped up.
Yeah, it definitely can happen. Companies, they look at the economics of a specific country all the time, and whether they're here or they're thinking about going here, they'll certainly change their plan if they find that the economics are unfavorable suddenly. I think what a lot of people want to see is whether President Trump, with his tariffs, is this a long-term situation, or is this a short-term sort of hit to renegotiate after CUSMA? And that's what everyone's waiting for, is how long, how much staying power does some of these changes have? That's the key question. If some of them are in play long-term, but definitely some companies, not just retailers, but manufacturers, may leave Canada and go to the U.S. to try to avoid some of those tariffs too.
The flip side being, if you're a Canadian entrepreneur and you want to take advantage of a moment, is this an opportunity for some to really drive home the Made in Canada label and start a small business?
Yeah, I think it's a great point too. I think that can definitely happen, especially if this has staying power, right? I think this is a wake-up call for Canada overall. I think we got complacent and we said, oh, we know we're with the U.S., they'll take care of us, et cetera, et cetera. This is a wake-up call. It's a bit of a slap in the face, right? So I think Canada overall has woken up, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a politician, the average Canadian. And I think we need to kind of shape up and diversify our economy a little more, whether it's building pipelines or, exporting products to other countries in Europe or Asia. We can't have all of our eggs in one basket, so to speak, and that's what we've had for the last, 30 years.
I'll be interested to see exactly how long term or how much staying power this actually has, because we've already heard talk about tariff fatigue. You know, every day the U.S. president is doing a news conference talking about something, and you know, we're already getting to that tune-out part of the cycle quite quickly, actually. And if that's the case, then, you know, do people just go back to their previous spending patterns?
I think the biggest, one of the biggest catalysts that'll determine whether these things stay is how much inflation hits. So it's an economic reality that when you increase, if you're in the US, if you're President Trump and you increase all these tariffs, you're going to import massive inflation. And that's going to be felt at the store level. And then suddenly you have 330 million Americans who are paying a lot more for products, right? And that was one of President Trump's platforms he ran on, was reducing inflation. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But yeah, there's a lot of fatigue right now. But I mean, a lot of people have stopped watching the news, right? Because they just can't take it anymore. It's too negative and there's so much going on, it can be overwhelming.
Yeah. But again, it sounds like an opportunity for marketers to really to change their tactics, you know, to spur on that spending.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's something that you're going to see a lot more ads coming out, you know, a lot more hang tags, a lot more shelf talkers at the retail level, you know, online, etc. There's lots of ways that, and Canadians will try to buy Canadian where they can. So I think definitely there's a market there between the two parties to try to do more business.
Bruce Winder, thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Have a great day.
That was retail analyst Bruce Winder. You've been listening to In This Economy. If you have any questions or story ideas, you can email me at mike.eppel@rci.rogers.com. Thanks for listening.